Hi, and thanks for joining me. It's some while since I've sat and chatted with you, and I thought it was about time I told you what I've been up to in recent months. I often do small jobs on the boat, which I don't film, but I do take still shots as a record, and I thought today I would talk to you about some of what I've been doing. Hi and welcome. I'm Alan from my Narrowboat venture. It's some while since I've sat and chatted to you. I know I've spoken to you when I've been cruising and doing other tasks, but I haven't engaged in this way for some long period, it seems to me. So I want to tell you what I've been up to. I don't always record everything I do on film. Sometimes I do small jobs and I take still shots so I can explain what I've been doing. But first of all, I'd like to welcome all my new subscribers. There are so many of you now. I want to say a big thank you. Thank you for supporting the channel, and welcome aboard to everyone, particularly those that have joined recently. Many of you have been with me right from the start, and I really do appreciate that. I've said this many times before. I do enjoy reading your comments, the support and encouragement I get from them. Sometimes I'm actually overwhelmed by the lovely remarks that I receive, so thank you all for that. I've been meaning to talk to you about the solar panels and that strange vibration noise I was getting, a sort of resonance at certain revs that I found very annoying. I'll quickly say something about the solar panels. I've had these now for must be 3 months or so, and I'm very pleased with them. They do seem to work. Certainly when I'm laid up during the day and the sun is out, I have no problem with power. However, I do think my batteries are a bit naff. At the end of the day and in the morning, they're right down to sort of like 10.6, and they should be higher than that. So that is something I'm going to look at. I'm going to have my batteries investigated to see if they've had it. I know a couple of them are only 2.5 years old. The other batteries are probably older, but they may all need renewing. So that's something that will be investigated. Regarding the noise, which had been most annoying, I seem to recall I had a thought way before lockdown in March as to what it was. I've always suspected it's something to do with the weed hatch, and I have been proved right on that. I've had all different ideas suggested, particularly the engine mountings, but I had checked those as best I could. I just felt if it was the engine mountings, I would know about it. The resonance was something slightly different. Some of you may recall last year, I think it was, it might even be the year before, that I renewed the rubber strips around the weed hatch. In fact, I think I'll go and get you the material that I use, so I'm just going to pop off for a moment. Bear with me. Sorry about that. Underneath the cover we use this. This is 50 millimeters wide or 2 inches, and it's quite thick, as you can see. When I renewed the seal underneath the cover, I noticed that on top of the box there was another form of sealant as well. So there was a sealant underneath the cover and on top of the weed hatch box. And when I queried this, I was told, no, you only have it on the cover, on the underside of the cover, not on top of the box. So what was there I removed, and that was my mistake, because various tests, I did have someone on board with me at one stage, and I'm sure that was before lockdown, because I didn't have anyone on board when lockdown started. We went out and he listened, and he said it was coming from the back and exactly on the spot where the weed hatch is. So at the time I decided that somehow the weed hatch, the bottom plate possibly, I think they call that the baffle plate, was probably touching the sides of the actual box. So what I did, I borrowed an angle grinder and I ground down. I'm getting all sorts of insects on the camera, it's unbelievable. That was a wasp just visiting. I've had spiders and so forth, and there's strands everywhere. Very off-putting when you're trying to speak. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought again now. Yeah, the weed hatch cover, I borrowed an angle grinder and I ground off the edges of the baffle board, thinking that that might just make it sort of fit better. Well, that didn't actually change anything. And after a period of time, and I've been thinking about this for months, I realised that probably the whole weed hatch cover needed to be raised up, and that is the reason why that other sealant was on top of the box. Now to do that I've used this material. This isn't so wide, but the top of the weed hatch box is only as wide as this, so this is fine. This is a very squidgy sort of sealer, and first of all I put one layer on, and subsequently I added a second layer. That still didn't resolve it, but when I added a third layer of this, it resolved the issue. Now this is very soft, and I think I need a harder material, because this will compress down under the weight of the cover. Once the cover is put back and it's screwed on, then this is going to squash down very, very easily. So that is what resolved the weed hatch problem, using this and basically raising the cover up a little bit. That's what the answer was. So the cruise that I did to Warwick, not that I actually reached Warwick, I didn't have any problems. It did start making a little bit of noise on a subsequent cruise, which I will talk to you about shortly, but that was the problem. So I'm glad I've got that resolved. Something else I did earlier in the year, I did it in May, was I did some needlework on my cratch cover. Yes, me doing needlework. It is hard to believe, I have to say, but sometimes it's necessary. Each side of the cratch has a sort of locking mechanism inside. I call it a locking mechanism. What it is, it's a flap. And the flap has a couple of poppers on it, and you can pop them onto the inside of the gunnel, and it sort of helps make it secure. Well, on both sides the flap has come unstitched for about half its length, and the side I had access to, which was the starboard side, that's the way I normally moor, I'm up against the jetty on the starboard side, I managed to stitch that, and I did quite a successful repair, which I'm proud of, I have to say. I've still got the other side to do, but you have to be in the right mood for needlework, I've found, so it's not something I'm rushing to do. More recently I've done a little job around the side hatch. The sealant inside the side hatch has been peeling off and looking very unsightly for a long while. And every time I pass it I think I must do something about that. Well, with winter coming I thought, yes, I'm going to finally sort this out. So I scraped off all the old sealant and I've renewed it and I've painted around it, and that's come out reasonably well. The next task is going to be putting in some insulation around the hatch doors to keep the drafts down. I have bought the insulation, but I haven't got round to fitting it yet. Now, some of you will recall I had to cut short my trip to Warwick, hence the reason I never got there. The reason was that I had to go and do some babysitting, which is a bit of a misnomer because the baby was 7 years old, my grandson. My son was back at work having been furloughed, and he was having trouble for a few days of having proper cover for him. So I said I'd pop down to the West Country and look after him. And we did what we did earlier in the year. Some of you may recall I showed you some scenes of Dartmoor, and we went out to Dartmoor. We weren't up there that long, but you might like to see some of the trip getting up to Dartmoor and us just having a quick mooch around. Well, I'm back at Dartmoor. 6 months since I came to Dartmoor, when I last looked after my grandson. I've come down to Exeter to stay for a few days, looking after my grandson while my son is at work. He's been furloughed for some while, but is now back at work. Didn't have cover, so I was happy to come on down. We had a bit of a rough journey getting here. The weather was pretty awful. It rained and rained and rained. But now we're here, the sun has come out, and it's a beautiful day, I have to say. Really beautiful. Well, we both got our walking boots on, so we're about to step out and go for a lovely walk. We're going to make our way over to the old quarries, which are some way in the distance. The sun keeps going behind the clouds, so one minute I look ahead and the quarries are lit up, and the next minute they're in darkness. But they are some way off, so I'm not actually sure whether we'll get there. It is trying to rain still. Not so bad now though. I think it might have been a little bit optimistic hoping to get to the quarries today. They are somewhere in the distance. I did have a reason for wanting to go there. It's quite interesting, and there was something I wanted to show you, but no doubt I'll come back another time and I'll do it then. So we're going to go back to the van and have some lunch. The van isn't too far away. It is actually quite warm in the sun. Quite a pleasant day. Don't actually need a jacket on. Only brought it in case it rained heavily. But that hasn't transpired. We had a little bit of rain, not much at all. Well, we're just having lunch now. You can probably tell I'm not eating a cheese top roll. It's a sandwich with cheese in. It is blowing up a bit, but it's been a nice day. But it can change very quickly. Since coming back to the marina, I have been on another more leisurely cruise on the Leicester section of the Grand Union Canal. On that section there were no locks at all, and I made my way up to Foxton Locks. I didn't actually go through the locks, that was my sort of destination point, but I did moor up there and stop overnight, and I was gone I think 7 or 8 days, so quite a lengthy cruise. If you're keen, you can get up to Foxton Locks in a day from the marina at Yelvertoft. I normally take 2 days, but it was a very leisurely cruise, and I laid over on 1 or 2 days, and I really enjoyed it. So that will be the next series of cruising videos that I'll be publishing. I haven't even started the editing on those yet. I expect by the time you see this I will have done, but that will be in the next series, and that will take us more into the winter period and the run up to Christmas. So I hope you'll eagerly await that series of cruising. There'll be several episodes, I don't know how many until I do the editing, but I hope it will be as enjoyable, and you'll see some of life on board as well. It won't just be cruising. As I said, it's a much more leisurely pace. Got another boat coming down towards me now. They approach very quietly, so nice to see. I'll show you as it comes past. I think I brought you up to date with most things. I'm just trying to have a think what else I've been doing. I did actually make some notes earlier. Mention the cratch repair, mention the batteries are not doing too well, mention the weed hatch and the side hatch. If I think of anything else I'll let you know. But for the time being, that is it. When I wasn't actually filming boats, there were quite a lot of them around, but now there's none to be seen. I've moved on since I last spoke to you, so I'm now in a different location. I forgot to mention Daphne. I know a lot of you were taken with her, as was I, but unfortunately we're not together anymore. There's always a bit of a delay between filming and publishing, so the times don't always tally. You're seeing things at a different time to when they were actually filmed. You know what they say, don't you? Ask no questions, tell no lies. So I won't be taking any questions on the situation, so please don't ask. I just wanted you to know that we're no longer together. So once again, many thanks for watching. I always enjoy your company. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. These are difficult times still, getting worse again here in England, which is not very good, but we have further restrictions now. I won't go into the details because they're always changing, and you never know from one day to the next. What we find very odd is that there are different rules in Scotland and Wales to those in England, and if you're close to the border you could live in Wales and attend school in England and vice versa. It does make it very difficult for people. But as I say, I hope you're all keeping safe and well. Take the utmost of care, look after yourselves. Bye for now.